Hey, Riverland, Long Prairie Gray Eagle. Sometimes I listen to contemporary music. As I've said many, many times to you, I'm sure you know and remember, when students come into my classroom, I just love something beautiful for them to look at on the screen. And I want some fantastic music running as they take their seats. Try to distract them from what they want to look at, which is, instead of that or each other's faces, they look at their phones. Anyway, I think that's pretty sounding. And I should cut that and start teaching you something today. Let's try to get you more or less the material that I offered my Comp 2 sections on Friday for my 9 o'clock and my 11 o'clock. Lots of nice people finding our way through the year. So we'll start with a little bit of poetry that I want to explain to you. And I want to talk about one of the journal entries that I offered you for the week, which is the idea of inviting you to think about being a teacher. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit today. I opened up the floor to both of my classes on Friday, to the 9 tribe and the 11 o'clock crew. And I talked a little bit, and then I said, hey, do you have any questions about the teaching life? Anything you'd like to know? I'll answer any question you got. And boy, did I get a couple of good questions. I didn't see them coming even. There's a silence in Zoom that is hissing me into madness, which is why I'm going back home to E339 in Brainerd. But I'm still working for Riverland, so that's a sure thing at this point. So I want to talk about school. I want to talk about the idea of being a teacher. Got kind of a researchy kind of thing to think about, but it's kind of above the terrain. We'll get all nitpicky about all kinds of stuff later. How to do an MLA citation. Doesn't that sound fun? But I want to mess around a little bit with the idea of sometimes a big difference between having an opinion of something and actually knowing it. The Greeks, Socrates, I should be specific, believed that only philosophers, only lovers of philosophy could actually know something. Rhetoricians are consigned to just trafficking in opinion. I don't quite believe that, although I do know what he was talking about, because rhetoricians have historically been wonderful people, but also they can be dangerous and deceiving. Ask any politician. So I got a thing or two to say about that, and a couple stories. One trivial and one a little bit more poignant in terms of proving the point that I wanted to prove. And there's a story that I was going to tell my crews on Friday that is going to have to wait because I didn't get to it. But first, just a couple things. You know you're a Minnesotan when you go outside and go, oh my, thank God the temperature has risen to 25 degrees. You are a chronic, serial, licensed Minnesotan at that point. And it is actually up to 30 here, which I would call a miracle. And I got to go on my first run yesterday in a couple of weeks. But right now, there's some just dreamy snow going by my house. Check this out. In my peat bog, big flakes, big like 1 inch, we call that kind of confetti style flakes. And it's just such a gentle silence when it's snowing like this. And that's one of the many things I'm grateful for regarding where I live, the silence of it. And let me back up. I just counted on my fingers. It's been 1 year and 5 months since I got to introduce a poet live. And we're not even sure if I'm going to be able to do that next year. There's just uncertainty everywhere. But when I did introduce Sweet Kava Akbar, check out this hair, man. In October of 2019, before the calamities of the day descended, before the darkness descended, if you got to introduce a poet, right, it's part of the deal. And you got to be fast, you got to be brief, you got to set a mood, you got to let them know that you're the host, and then you get out of the way. And you let the real show go on, which is the poet. Nothing is more forgettable than the introduction to a poet. And I've been writing them for over 30 years. So I know that territory, but generally, one of the ways to try to stick in somebody's head is to tell some kind of story. So when I introduced Kava Akbar, you need a deal too, because this is Minnesota, right? So my deal was, when you get English teachers in a car together or at a social gathering, what we do is we assign things to each other. And what I love is when poets assign poets. So at the time I was hosting Kava, and I was hosting Kava because a poet named Bryant Voigt had told me that Kava knew more about contemporary poetry at the age of 30 than anyone she knew. And I'm like, I've never heard of the guy. And I'm like, I was riding in the car going, how does this, somewhat elderly poet from Vermont, how could she possibly be connected to an Iranian American poet who teaches at Purdue? Well, I didn't even ask about it. I didn't care. So I hosted Kava because Bryant Voigt told me so. Told me to. This was the crowd. I told this to the crowd, what I'm telling you. I also said that I hosted Bryant Voigt because Peter Balakian had said, you have got to host Bryant Voigt. And I went, okay, I kind of know who she is. So let's, before we get going here, let's spend a few minutes with Bryant Voigt. This is about 3.5 minutes. Stick with it. You can scrub the bar always and get away from the poetry if you want. I can't stop you from doing that. Not a lot of you picked up on the extra credit option that I gave you with the last video, but special thanks to the 3 or 4 of you that did. And I'm going to write you personal emails pretty quick here. It's not too late to pick up on that extra credit. Looks like some of you are falling behind on my vids. 28 views, but only 4 people took the extra credit. Maybe they didn't have time to help me with my presentation. Anyway, I'm talking too much. 6 minutes in. Here's Bryant Voigt.
The world is so full of meaning, we just can't even grab it by the tail. My name is Bryant Voigt, and I'm a poet and a teacher. And I try to make poems that capture something of the world and the human experience of living in the world, which is fraught. It's fraught, it's challenging, it's complicated. And it seems to me that poetry is able to capture some of those complications in a way that none of the other arts exactly do. I grew up on a farm. I like living out in the countryside. As you can see behind me, this is formerly a working farm here in Vermont. And some of the creatures from that environment come into my poems. So whether that's direct or indirect, I don't know quite how to trace it. So I've always tried hard not to repeat myself with each book. I've written longer kinds of pieces. Lyric poems tend to be quite short. I've also written sequences as another way to see if more of the world could come in. My most recent book, Headwaters, I eliminated all punctuation. So there's no punctuation whatsoever. What that does is kind of force the language to go all the way to that white space over there at the end on the right-hand margin, so that the reader, I hope, has no choice but to follow me where I want to go. In the medicine wheel, the emblem for wisdom is the same for gratitude. At dusk, at dark, the far-sighted owl strikes in utter silence. When we hear it from the tree or the barn, what it announces is already finished. It's all failure in the making of art, because you always fail to reach whatever that thing is that's sort of glimmering out there that has no shape yet and has no form yet. And what are you hoping for in your heart of hearts? You always fail. You always fail. If you didn't fail, why would you write the next one? What's the compensation? Why would anybody undertake such a thing? It's because of the exhilaration that happens within the process of doing it. That you're able to know more about the world, more about yourself. You're more fully alive than at any time. To have a foundation come along and say, we want you to do that work, and we're going to make it possible for you to do that work for 5 years. It's absolutely extraordinary. There's nothing whatsoever that prepared me for a single moment of thinking that this could ever happen.
I'm sorry to have to tell you that Ellen doesn't live on that farm anymore. This is only about 3+ years ago. Yeah. And when she came, she barely came because her husband was so sick with cancer. And then Ellen had her own health issues, and she had to leave that farm. And the only comfort in it for me is that she's only a little ways away from here. She's in St. Paul, being looked after by her daughter, Dudley, who never married. And Dudley was at our dinner table when we did the big feast for Ellen. And there's another thing I'd like to get back to. Here's her book, Messenger. It says new and selected. I got a funny feeling we're going to be seeing the collected poems of Ellen Bryant Voigt soon, because that's the last, I already told you, that's the last book that comes out in a poet's career. I'm quite curious to read about the idea of teaching, and students who take more than one class from me, they have to weather up under this question. I cannot stop asking it. Every single semester, I ask every single student that I'm teaching, can you tell me if you've ever thought about it? Have you ever thought about being a teacher, an elementary school teacher, a middle school teacher, high school teacher, college, university, special ed? And this is not an easy thing for me to talk about this week, because the day before, I talked about this on Thursday, my older boy, my son, who's precious to me, told me that he's leaving teaching after only 3.5 years. He doesn't want to teach in the pandemic anymore, and he's gotten a very serious offer from a company that understands that he's a genius with, in addition to teaching, public speaking, editing, design, video. He's taught me how to kind of do this. And he's leaving at the end of the trimester. I was hoping he would go to the end of the year. And I'm doing a lot of praying about that, but that's writ large, he's just he's the tip of the iceberg. Riverland, Long Prairie Gray Eagle students, it's a crisis time in education right now. It was a crisis before the pandemic began. Before the pandemic began, 1 in 3 teachers were leaving the profession after just a few years. The work is hard. The work is challenging, and it's not for everybody. But now that the pandemic is here, we've talked about this, it's a crisis, and I think it has never been more important for me to recruit teachers, to put it before people and say, hey, could you think about this? Young people have never, ever never needed teachers of genius, great mentors, more than this. And I don't think my son's going to put that piece of chalk down and he's going to walk, and that's okay. I'll love him no matter what. There's lots of good ways to have, lots of good ways to live in the world. And we'll see if my younger boy, who's just getting going, the 24-year-old, Jeffy's 26, we'll see if the 24-year-old sticks with it. He's teaching 5th graders in Litchfield, and he's realizing how hard the work is. In asking you, would you think about teaching? I'm asking you to think about the absorbing work that hopefully will be your life. I'm asking you, for what will you live? What will you live for? And if you got the answer to that, well, you've got the answer to the question, what might you die for? There's one thing for sure. Teachers have pretty high job satisfaction. There's a recent poll by Gallup indicated to all of us that most people don't have job satisfaction. It's like 35-40% of the people in the world that have a job, if they're lucky enough to have a job, are happy about what they're doing. 30 to 40% of the people out there working are not feeling really engaged by what they're doing. And I would call this a problem, but I'll say again, as I'm going to say as long as the Lord gives me breath, one of the clearest paths to a life without regret is to serve children, is to serve young people. In fact, the more you're serving other people, the higher your job satisfaction will be. So I hope you think about it. And I know many of you might have written already that journal due tonight. Sorry, Johnson, no need to apologize. There's no need to apologize. I get it. You'll be doing teaching one way or another. For those of you that become parents, guess what? That's a 24/7 teaching job that never ends, even when your kids grow up and leave home. And I'm just really hopeful that what happens to me semester after semester will continue happening, which is that students of mine get sick of answering this question. They're like, Johnson, I told you already, in this class, in this class, in this class, I don't want to do it. One of my favorite examples, Abby Voss is one of my examples. Abby Voss, who's starting up an English education program up at Superior. She pushed back on that too. Holy cow, did she get sick of answering that question. Well, take 4 classes from me. You're going to have to talk about it. And I think one of the more dramatic examples was a sweet woman named Sam Beckers. Sam Beckers, up in Brainerd, she was my student, 4 classes, Comp 1, Comp 2, Humanities and Mythology. I think she only wrote 1 sentence out of defiance in the end. I told you, Johnson, I'm going to be an architect. Well, you guys, you all better be ready for the idea that you might need Plan B. Sam Beckers went to the University of Minnesota, and pretty quickly, only partway through the first class she took on mechanical drawing, a professor had to sit her down and say, I hope gently, this isn't the path for you. This is not the path. You're not going to be an architect. Now, I'm not sure what her process was after that. But pretty quickly after that, like the following fall, after she left me, actually it was a year and a half later, her younger brother, Andrew Becker, who was hilarious, said one day in class in the morning, hey, Sam's coming today. She wants to have lunch with you. I was so excited. I'm like, fantastic. Have her text me. I'll make sure we get tacos. And she texted me, and I made sure she had a couple of chicken tacos just like me. And it was just like old times. And my goodness, was she transformed. The day before that, she was a 16-year-old girl who was so shy she couldn't even look me in the eyes. And she was this vivacious, graceful woman. Of course, I knew that's what she would turn into. And she was so excited to report to me that she had decided to be a teacher. She's going to be a teacher all her life. She had already gotten herself involved in some kind of accelerated licensure program at the U of M. And she was volunteering, observing at Armstrong High School in Minneapolis. Ramla, I don't know how close you are to Armstrong, because I know you live in Minneapolis, but I think that's a pretty rough high school. There are schools in the inner cities where teachers are getting punched in the head and sworn at. She didn't care. She was just like, somebody pinch me, and I hope that happens to again. Almost the last idea. If you want to save the world, you got to recruit teachers. I feel like I'm not getting anywhere today. I got some fantastic questions. And I think a very serious question came from a very serious man, a guy named Chris Ilitalo, who's in my humanities class at 1 o'clock, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. He was sitting there in his mask up at my college. I knew exactly where he was by the background. He said, look, you're a committed teacher. You care about us. You care about every student. What do you do when you see a student in trouble? What's your method? How do you reach out to them? And I can't even, what did I say? I think I just said something like, you reach out with a conversation and you hope they reach back. I was completely taken aback by a student, what was her name? I think Sabrina Dietrich asked me, what's the greatest moment of your entire teaching career? What is the greatest day of your teaching life? What happened? And I had to pause. I backpedaled a minute. I'm like, whoa, girl, that is a very serious question, mainly because it made me think of 10,000 things. And there's 10,000 bad things that have happened to me too. Strike that, 9,000. Strike that, not anywhere near that. At first I didn't even know what to say. And because I told the story in the fall, I'll go real quick and just cut to the punchline or the end of it. You'd think that my greatest moment would have been, I don't know, getting my job at Central Lakes College, winning teaching awards like Central Lakes College Teacher of the Year. Yeah, I got that plaque in my office. Who cares? You might think that my greatest moments were about being on a stage with hundreds of people watching me introduce a world-class poet year after year after year. No. The greatest moment in my entire teaching life happened when a mom of an autistic boy, a boarding student at my college from Iowa, my old school rather, said to me, if my son, Ruffin, ever smiles, remember this from the fall, you guys, if you were a Comp 1er? If my son ever smiles, I want you to write me an email. If he ever laughs, I want you to call me immediately. I'm like, okay. I would be lying if I can tell you what made him smile that first time in my classroom. But I stood there. He's off to my left. That's why I'm looking to the left. I went, whoa, he just smiled. Ruffin just smiled. And I ran down and I think I left class. Bolted down the hallway, peeled off the email, and then ran back and kept teaching. And then a little while after that, this is the biggest moment of my life. The only Jewish kid at my old high school, Max Lieberman, came to me one day and said, would you be willing to teach an entire American lit class in a banana suit? I said, yeah, absolutely. Hell yeah. Get that suit. Install it on me right now. And I got so comfortable teaching in the banana suit that I forgot that I had it on. And I went back to my office, left the door open so kids could work and be with each other. And when I hit that doorway in the banana suit, Ruffin looked up at me and burst out laughing. And I went, oh my goodness, he just laughed. That is my greatest accomplishment. That's it. That's it. Imagine that. Isn't that a remarkable thing? I'm only going to let's get this idea out. I'm trying to do the math here. I had about 6 minutes and now I'm at 11. So I'm 15, 16 minutes into this. I'm quite interested in, we're onto some researchy stuff here. I'm quite interested in how people come to believe things, what people believe in, what they value, what they know, what they think they know, what they're doing or what they think they're doing. And thinking in this way, I'm moving hopefully beyond the basics, right? It's snowing right now. That's a fact. Who cares? It's cloudy today. Well, that matters, but those are just facts. Those are just factual observations. I can go to my thermometer, and I think it told me a moment ago that it was 31 degrees. Well, there's a fact. But I'm delving a little bit past that. The idea of, and I have no talent for this. I can't even believe I used this word in class Friday. I can't believe I'm using it now. The word epistemology. I have 3 undergrad majors. Like I triple majored in humanities, history, and English, not philosophy. It kind of scared me. I didn't have any talent for it. So I'm a little uneasy to be even attempting to talk about epistemology. Epistemology is the study of what we know. It's the study of knowledge and how you come to acquire knowledge. And we've been here before with the word. The word at the beginning, at the center of that word, epistemology, is the word pistis or pisteus, which means proof. How do you know when you've proved something rhetorically? And don't worry about that in relation to your research paper. You don't have to worry about discovering something that no one knows. You don't have to worry about advancing scholarship on whatever hero project you take up research-wise. But before you take that project up, let's recognize a few things. You don't have to be objective. Okay, nobody is. And I used Sheena James as the example. She's in my 11 o'clock class. She's asking me to help her with a scholarship. Am I neutral or objective about Sheena James? No, I love that woman. I'm a fan of her. She's taken a second class from me, and when I pick up that application, I'm going to go to town on it, and I'm going to put it over the top and help her get the scholarship as long as I get 3%. That's the deal. It's really worth it. So, put a couple of examples for you. And also, with the first one, I want to suggest to you that you know things that you don't know the origin of. There are ideas that you have, values that you have, which you think are facts that are in your head. I'll go to a Canadian philosopher named Charles Taylor to give me the concept there. Up in Canada, Charles Taylor at McGill University, here I am still dabbling in philosophy, talks about something called the social imaginary. That average guy walking down the street is thinking thoughts, and they were installed there. By what? By culture, by society, by media, by things we hear, hearsay. And is it knowledge or is it an opinion? Well, I've got 2 examples for you today. One of my examples was about monosodium glutamate. And if you want to hear something fantastic, go to Google. I'll spare it to you, even though we listened to it a little bit on Friday. I'm trying to be efficient today. If you got a moment, go to Google and enter This American Life, and then enter monosodium glutamate. And it works like this. A lot of people think, I didn't get a lot of hands in the air with my 9 o'clock class. Well, when I said to my 11 o'clock class, hey, how many of you think MSG is bad for you? Monosodium glutamate. Probably 7 or 8 hands went into the air. And it looks stupid because I had a box of shore lunch, which I have in the house all the time because I'm always catching fish out of my lake. Well, the monosodium glutamate is in shore lunch. Well, I said to the students, why do you think that? Well, one of my older students, the smartest woman in the room, Lizzie, she knew a thing or two about it. She has the idea that she has an allergy to it, and maybe she does. I'm allergic to bunnies, for instance. There's weird Jeff Johnson trivia, like you would care. But truth be told, here's the thing. The whole world thinks that monosodium glutamate is bad for you. And that planet-wide thought comes from a single letter that was written to the New England Journal of Medicine by a doctor impersonating another doctor. And the story is this. These two doctors were out having dinner in the early 70s, I think. And it was an internist and an orthopedic surgeon. And the internist, they had a few glasses of wine, they ate a big meal, and at the end of the meal, they're all really old friends. And the internist says to the orthopedic surgeon, I'm a much better doctor than you. I've been in the New England Journal of Medicine, and there's no way an orthopedic surgeon like you would ever get printed in the New England Journal of Medicine, ever. You're never going to get in there. So the doctor went home with a little buzz on, a couple glasses of wine, not glamorizing that. He sat down at his typewriter, and he wrote a letter to the New England Journal of Medicine, impersonating a dead doctor called Dr. Holman Kwok. Holman Kwok. He was pretending to be a Chinese guy. He was like, look, you know, I've been in the United States for a while, and every time I go to a Chinese restaurant, for a little while after that, I've got a headache. I feel sweaty. There's a burning sensation on my neck, and you know what? I've eliminated all the possible causes for this. I thought soy sauce, no. Cooking wine, no. And the doctor wrote that he'd come to the conclusion that monosodium glutamate was the cause of those side effects after he ate at a Chinese restaurant. Holman Kwok proclaimed that every Chinese restaurant uses it in copious amounts, and the whole world began to believe that. Guess what? One letter, one doctor throws words, they burn forever, and somehow everyone thinks that. Monosodium glutamate, for the record, is harmless. It's no different than using salt or pepper or any seasoning that you got in your seasoning cupboard. If you have a seasoning cupboard. If you don't, you'll get one. I got a big one. So that's just kind of artifact number one. Example number two, and I don't know if this will offend anyone, the example was, sometimes I feel like an 8th grade girl who says, no offense, but, and that 8th grade girl, what she's doing is she's telling her friend, I'm about to offend you. I'm going to offend you now. And because I'm preemptively telling you that I'm about to offend you, you can't rebut me. So get ready. No offense, but your hair sucks today. That's how that works. It's not quite what I'm doing, but you guys know who I am. To tell a story, and then we'll call this a day. A few years ago, my college, Central Lakes College, enacted something. They partnered with this organization in Brainerd, and they started up at Valentine's a program called, and this might make you uncomfortable, Condoms and Cupcakes. Condoms and cupcakes. And these nurses had tables out and you know, in a shaft of sunlight, and they were giving out exactly what the table proclaimed. Stop in, grab a cupcake, take a few condoms with you. And it was all about something called reproductive health, which I think of a little bit differently. And, devout Christian, I went, come on. And I couldn't say a word about it. Because for one thing, it's none of my business. I'm an English teacher. And for another, it's a public college. It's a secular college. And there's a delightful tension there. So kids picked up pretty quickly on the idea that I wasn't that happy about it. And there was one kid in particular, Tyler Cromwell, who's from down southern Minnesota, Mankato boy, car guy now. He took 4 classes from me. Wasn't the greatest student, but I loved him anyway to this minute. And there was a day where I was teaching my intro to humanities class on a spring day, kind of like today, snow falling. I can remember the light in that room. And Tyler did something that is not really advisable because I don't like to be interrupted. And he threw open the door of the classroom. 45 kids sitting there. Lecture hall is full. And he came in with a whole tray of cupcakes and a big bowl of condoms. And he very solemnly brought him up the aisle and put him in front of me like I was some kind of god. And he was, I don't know, putting his burnt offering or the sacrificial thing there. And I'm like, okay, ha ha ha, thank you. Look, I got to finish this lesson. Please take these away from me. I don't need cupcakes. I don't need condoms. I'll pass. So let me just try to review my thinking here. My thinking was, okay, what research supports this? What research supports the idea of distributing condoms at a college? We know the consequences of eating too many cupcakes. That's a bad idea. Don't do it. You'll get a big cupcake belly. But my question was, okay, they're distributing condoms in a public college of about 4,000 students, and the premise is that if we do that, we will reduce unwanted pregnancies and reduce the number of sexually transmitted diseases, which are horrible and can ruin your life. And if this is turning into a lesson on sex, I hope not. It's really about confirmation bias. So I just, instead of being objective, subjective, and going, shall we not? Or being objective, like, etc. I tried to be neutral. And I also tried to research the question in a neutral way, right? And so I actually went to the internet, and the Google is just so powerful. You can go to the internet and say, does distributing free condoms in a school reduce the number of pregnant, blah, 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 blah. You ask the question. You don't even have to know how to research anymore because the dang computer gives you everything that you want. Very quickly, I found an Atlantic Monthly article. Now, I get Atlantic Monthly. I don't think I'm either conservative or liberal. I'm none of those things. I'm quite interested in the truth, though. But I do get different kinds of magazines, general interest magazines, so I can see, how different perspectives. So I get New Yorker, I get Atlantic, I get Harper's, because the prose is really good, even if I don't agree with it politically. So suddenly I'm taken to an Atlantic Monthly article where a guy is writing about this, and he's going, you know what? I cannot believe I found this massive study that proves that this is a bad idea. Excuse me, the writer of the Atlantic Monthly article went into it with the bias, with the tilt, with the idea that if you do that, if you distribute condoms in a school, that you have lower pregnancies and lower rates of STDs. The writer was, I think the word horrified and amazed are fair words. You could look this up yourself. And then I went, wow, okay, I got the article. Now I need the study. And with another few taps of the fingers, I think I went to JSTOR. We'll have to talk about databases later. I found the actual study. And I hope I got the numbers right because this was 3-4 years ago. I found a study that ran for 10 years on over 200 high schools nationwide, from New York all the way to California. High schools and colleges and universities. And the researchers were going after that very question. So, and what they found is, astonishingly, the opposite happens. Now, if you distribute birth control pills, well, that's going to definitely reduce the number of pregnancies at a given school. But in fact, what the study found was that birth rates actually go up. Sexually transmitted disease rates go up because distributing condoms apparently, and the authors, you can find all of this yourself. These PhDs doing the research posited fairly straightforwardly that it actually increases promiscuity. The study found that if you give out condoms and then give a little bit of counseling, well, the rates go up moderately. But if you just dish them out pell-mell, along with cupcakes or not, both rates skyrocket. And I took it to the smartest people at the college. I go, look at this. Look, this is proof that what you're doing isn't working. I even took it to the nurses distributing the condoms. I said, look, I found this study. I printed it. It's 45 pages long. And they just smiled and said, you know what, we have our own data. And I'm like, okay. And I went back to my office and had chicken tacos. So what I'm trying to say to you is that there are some people that believe things and there's no talking them out of it. It's like that student I was talking about the other day that wrote that paper that I had to flunk. He was convinced that he should write a paper that attacks women. He was absolutely certain that his purpose in the world, at least that spring, was to write a paper that attacked feminism. There was no convincing him that he was wrong in his belief that the world is set up for women, for the privilege of women, and that men are second-class citizens. As an experienced, licensed white guy, I can tell you that that's not where equity, it's not the way to solve the inequality in this country. I hope I'm making some kind of sense. I'm 31 minutes in. Please start reading Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Try 20 pages. And I told my students the other day, I couldn't find my own copy of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and that made me think two things. One, it's probably in my office up in Brainerd. Number two, my wife probably got rid of it because the cover, look at that cover, that freaked my wife out. And I thank goodness for Amazon Prime. My actual copy will come tomorrow with my UPS guy that I'm getting to know in a personal way because it's the pandemic and he's here every other day. Be safe, be well, and I'll see you with 3 lessons this week because it's a full week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. God bless you all.